Hi, everybody. I'm Brad Nordstrom, owner and operator of Maximum Performance and Fitness here in West Fargo. Welcome back to the MPF podcast.
And I am Levi Nordstrom, majoring in communications at NDSU, here to provide the basic average perspective of a human.
How was your week of school first? Let's start out a little light note. Did you have a good week in class?
Yeah.
Did you go to class?
I did go to class.
Nice.
It was a pretty good week. Nothing too crazy. A lot of notes, just a basic lecture week, I would say. I didn't have any tests, so.
Hey, tell everybody about your radio show. You're doing a radio show. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Every Wednesday from 3 to 4 p.m. Central, to be specific, we have a radio show where it's me, I have Peter Velka, and Gavin Person, all doing basically a talk show about NFL football each week. We kind of go through the matchups of the previous week, what happened, big notes, and then we forecast the week to come. It's been a lot of fun, and I'll provide a link below for you guys to tune in. Today, we're going to be talking about diets.
Wow, this one's going to be deep. Lots of information we're going to provide. First thing I want you guys to know, I am not a licensed dietitian. This is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in trying any of these diets, you want to find a qualified nutritionist before you get too deep into these. We're just going to provide you some info today.
This is a baseline. This is a
Exactly.
beginner. So we have some topics we're going to be talking about, including keto, intermittent fasting, Mediterranean diet, vegan/plant-based, and maybe we'll kind of get into some other things later on. But with that being said, let's start with keto.
Keto. I think that one was like extremely popular, for sure 5 to 10 years ago. Extremely popular. I mean, everybody, hey, you're doing the keto. You doing keto. What's the story on keto? Just give us a little breakdown.
From what I've gathered, it is a very low carb. So if you guys are curious on how carbs work and how they affect your body, we have a video clip posted on the YouTube channel explaining if carbs are bad for you, they're good for you, and it's very high fat, surprisingly. Forces your body into ketosis, hence the name, burning fat for fuel. What do you think of that?
Well, the keto diet is quite interesting, and I think you're right. I think there was a misconception it was an extremely high protein type diet. Well, it's actually extremely high fat type diet. There's a ton of research on the keto diet, and I'd like to go to PubMed and actually look at the research from whether it's colleges or your Mayo clinics or whatnot, and just to see what they're saying instead of just going on the old interwebs. And a ton of pros and cons. I mean, pros on a keto diet is you actually can drop fat, and you can drop fat fast. So that's what most people are doing keto for fat loss. But there's a lot of actually positives for epilepsy management, metabolic health, because you're basically reducing your insulin levels, getting them caught up, and so forth. So type diabetes is down, helps with your brain neurologically. So there's a lot of, there's some cancer treatment that they use with a keto type diet that shows some promising effects with that. Now, it does work. I mean, it definitely does work. Now, there's definitely some negative. The one that I kind of find interesting is they're talking about cardiovascular risk. There is a higher risk for arteriosclerosis, sporadic cardiovascular activity like hardening of the arteries, and that would be if your diet's higher in saturated fat from red meats. Now, the thing that's kind of interesting that they don't break down is, so let's take a look at a red meat from your farm-raised, grass-fed,
non-GMO.
They're eating non-GMO type foods. They're not getting shot up with antibiotics and so forth. It's just a straight cow that's out there ranging free. That fat is totally different than that cow that's in a farm, that they're in a pen, so to speak, and they're getting shot up with steroids and and hormones and so forth to grow fast and fed anything they can eat to get them bigger and faster and to slaughter to us to eat, those are less healthy. So what the research doesn't really explain the quality of the meat that they're eating. So that does make a difference. So anytime you have an opportunity when you're buying your meat, especially your red meat, if you can find that grass-fed, hormone-free, antibiotic-free, that meat is way healthier for you. And you don't have to worry about the negative effects within the fat. Because the fat cells is where these hormones are stored. That's where some of these negative effects come in. So that's probably the biggest scary spot, maybe, so to speak, with the keto diet is really the quality of the food that people are eating. The other thing is very obvious is nutrient deficiencies. You do need to look at that, and that's where you'd want to get some testing work done if you seriously want to do a keto diet, because you are not going to be in balance if you're not eating any grains or anything. So you will definitely have some deficiencies in minerals and vitamins. It's hard to maintain, really.
Yeah, when it comes to diets, first of all, I think the very most common thing that I have noticed is nutrient deficiencies are very common, because typically a diet is you're cutting something out.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure exactly how to really reduce that issue or risk when it comes to not having enough nutrients from something that you're trying to avoid. Like, how do you even get those nutrients?
Well, I think you're going to have to, you'll have to supplement them. You have to supplement them with a good quality multivitamin. There's going to be some that are more lax than the others. So that's where you're going to want to team up with a professional that can do blood work and determine what are those big deficiencies, and then they can help supplement those with specialized supplements. So, it's obvious it works. You can drop fat weight, but you need to make sure you find somebody that can really help you out. Find a professional that is good with the keto diet that's going to really help lock you in.
Now, who would you say the target group of, age group for keto would be? Because from what I'm gathering is you don't really want athletes on it, because athletes are supposed to be eating at least a good amount of carbs. So where would you say that range is, that age group range?
Well, I think the ones that it's going to be probably work best with, there's going to be your obese client, pretty solidly overweight type client. Those ones will probably be the ones that will benefit the most from it. With that being said, that client needs to be mentally bought in that this is going to work. You can't just say, all right, this is what we're going to do. And you need to get that client to buy in. And then, boom, they'll do well on it.
Motivation's like half the battle when it comes to working out or, anything, really.
Yep.
Now let's go on to intermittent fasting. I feel like this is one that's more popular than pretty much any other diet, in my opinion. Vegan, I guess, is kind of popular, but I feel like fasting, in a way, is kind of like the big one. Why do people like fasting?
Well, I think you're right. I think the intermediate fasting is the one that's probably the most popular right now. There's time windows, and that's what's interesting too. So you can choose, all right, I've got a 4-hour time window where I'm going to eat. There might be an 8-hour time window. It might be a 12-hour time window. There's variations of the diet itself. It works as well. It's another one hey, if you buy in, it's going to work really well. I think the challenge with intermittent fasting is that people think, let's say, all right, I've got 6 hours. That's my window of eating from noon to 6 p.m. I think some people think they can eat whatever they want for as long as they want and just hammer 5,000 calories in that 6-hour window. And I think that's you're not going to get where you want to go. The other thing that'll happen is you may not eat enough. And eventually what will happen is your metabolism is going to slow down. You're going to start to lose lean body mass, muscle mass. And then when you do happen to kind of fall off the wagon, so to speak, you're going to gain more fat weight than you had in the first place because you've lost muscle mass. The other concern with an intermittent type fasting would be potential eating disorders. That one kind of is a spooky thing where if you have eating disorders, or you have a behavior that you're very addictive to type of activities like that, there's a chance that you could all of a sudden have a eating disorder, so to speak. And then that's kind of a spooky thing. Could lead to binge eating. Obviously, that's not great. So there's definitely some negatives behind it, but there's also positives.
And when it comes to binge eating, I feel like that is when you kind of almost go off the deep end in a sense.
Yeah.
I've seen the internet, people gaining weight rapidly compared to like you're overweight. That's when you become to that next level of like obese, where it's really concerning. What is binge eating necessarily mean?
That's a good question too, because it's like I always kind of look at it as it's really kind of a mental mind game, so to speak. It's a challenge. It's a mental game where it's almost like you don't know when that next meal is going to come, and you just go crazy, and you overeat and you overstuff yourself. You eat extremely fast, and next thing you know, you're overfull, and you just took in 2,000 calories in 20 minutes, and you do that again a little while later. I mean, it's definitely a challenge mentally.
What would you recommend to eat in that 6-hour window? Because, you know, you made it sound like you're really walking a thin line, because you don't want to eat too much, but you also don't want to eat too little.
Exactly.
So how do you kind of understand your body and figure out what you need to have and what's too much, what's too little?
I mean, this would be what I would say is more of a well-balanced diet is what you'd be shooting for. Where if you're doing keto, it's like, all right, you got your high fat, you get your moderate protein, and very little to any carbohydrates. Now it's like, all right, well, we're going to have some carbs, we're going to have some proteins, we're going to have some fats. If we want to have a little treat here and there, we're going to throw that in there. And then when you're having your food, whatever it is, let's say you're eating at noon, you want to have a good, usually 4 to 8 ounces of protein, depending on, add in some vegetables, maybe a piece of whole grain bread or two, have a piece of fruits, fine, and so forth. It's just that the biggest thing is to stay away from extremely processed foods. And
so don't be going to, McDonald's and Arby's.
Right. I'm going to go to McDonald's and I'm going to order a Big Mac and a double cheeseburger and a big large fries because I can. I'm in my window. It doesn't work that way. It's not healthy.
It's a good point when it comes to like that big misconception of eating whatever you want in your window. You cannot use that as a crutch.
Right. I think that's what happens a ton of times. If you're like, all right, I've got my 6-hour window, like I said, let's say it's from noon to 6, and you're eating well-balanced, healthy diets, you're getting, 2,500. Well, it depends on who you are, but you might be getting that 1,500 to 2,500, 3,000 calories. You're going to do fine. The ideal situation is you wouldn't want to eat past, let's say, 7 p.m. anyway. You want to have about a 3-hour window where your body can metabolize your food before you go to bed, when you're just laying there anyway.
It's time to talk about the next diet, and it's a diet that, honestly, I am not nearly as familiar with, that I feel like it's kind of under the radar diet, potentially, with the Mediterranean diet.
Mediterranean diet is actually probably, if you compare all of them, was the one that makes the most sense. Minimally processed foods, lots of vegetables, lots of fruits, beans, grains, nuts. They like to use like the extra virgin olive oil as your primary source of fat. Fish, chicken. I mean, a little bit of red meat. You still can have some red meat. They want it not quite as much as some of these other diets. They're saying, hey, you can have a little bit of refined sugars, but keep it low. So to me, it makes probably the most sense. And you don't hear about it as much as you did probably 15, 20 years ago, but it's one that actually does make sense.
It's kind of following most of the diets where it's like you want to avoid the processed foods, look for some organic, whole foods. It does honestly look the most realistic out of all of them. I feel like it's very balanced again. And there is potentially a downside that I'm curious about. Does it cause slower weight loss? Do you have to be more patient when it comes to a Mediterranean diet compared to maybe a keto?
No, I would say you probably do. It all really depends on A, how much weight you have to lose, B, how well are you at actually following the diet. You're probably not going to drop it as fast as you would on a keto diet, But I think that the positive is it's something sustainable. And that's what really you want to do. Yeah, you're going to have to make some changes. If you want to drop some weight, you have to make changes. But you want to find something also that will allow you to, have some of those enjoyable things in life, so to speak, comfort foods.
So it almost allows you to stay motivated because it's more sustainable or reliable. And you can have all sorts of different foods compared to maybe a keto diet would restrict you. But it's kind of the tortoise and the hare situation.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Over
That's a good way
time,
to put it.
Mediterranean might be a little bit more sustainable. And over time, it might be more effective. But I feel like it also goes on a person-by-person basis almost.
Well, that is, you really nailed it on the head right there. All of these are really person-by-person basis. Whatever you choose, if you're going to follow a structured diet like any of these, you have to be bought in and you have to believe it's going to work for you. Otherwise, it's just, you're going to run in a circle.
Let's go to the vegan or plant-based diet. Now, this one has gotten, I feel like, a lot of hate recently. And I'm kind of curious as to why that is.
I'm not a fan of the vegan diet because I think that we need protein. We truly do. And yes, some of the plant-based foods do offer protein, but it's different. It's not the same as an animal-based type protein. I know that there are some people that do it for maybe they call it religious reasons why they don't have meat. And then others do it because maybe it's a fad, it's a thing. I'm not bought in that a vegan diet is number one thing to do. There is some research that does show that plant-based diet really does help with fighting diseases, heart disease, and so forth. But we don't know. You really kind of got to dig into the research to find out, who are we using as subjects? If we're using obese subjects, well, absolutely. It doesn't really matter what diet you use. If they're dropping fat weight, all these markers are going to be better, whether it's the vegan diet or keto diet or whatever. That's the one thing it's just you've got to look at, who was actually using the research. Probably the huge thing if you look at a vegan diet, there is some huge supplementation that does need to happen. That I would be willing to bet that those people that if they're just dabbling in it are really missing out on. That's the thing that I find really interesting in the vegan diet is that you've got to take vitamin B12, you've got to take iodine. There's a number of different minerals that you don't get if you're not eating any meat.
Also, what I'm gathering is if you're struggling with weight loss or you are obese, just try diets. Just try it out and see which one that you like and that you feel like you can follow, because anything is better than, having all this processed food, of course. But just trying out a diet, see what happens, see if you like it. And if you don't, try out a different one. There's plenty of diets around, and I feel like you're almost bound to find one. And if you're motivated enough, over time, it will end up working out. You'll find one at least.
Yeah. Well, and I think a ton of people actually do that. I think you want to do your research. Like I said, whether if you're looking at one of the extreme ones, I really do believe that you need to find somebody that can help you that's qualified to do that. Otherwise, just take a look at what you're doing right now. Write down take 1 week, write down everything. You don't change anything. Write down everything you're eating and drinking, and then take a look at it. Mm-hmm. Whoa, I've had pizza 3 times this week. Well, maybe let's back that down to 1 time a week.
Doesn't pizza hit all the food groups?
Oh, it does. Pizza's basically like an open-faced sandwich.
Yep.
Who doesn't like pizza? But I really think that's an eye-opener. You don't have to measure anything. Just write everything down that you're eating and then take a look at, all right, let's see what we can make some changes, because you have to make changes. You have to make some changes to get to where you want to go. And then once you take a look at it, maybe you're drinking, 12-pack of pop every week. Well, let's cut that back. Everybody's different. We've got some people that the mindset is I need to cut it out. And then we've got some people that, it's kind of my treat. Okay, well, let's cut your treats in half. and you're going to make progress. But once you do that, you have to be consistent, period. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You get yourself set up, and you have to stick to it.
If you cut back your desserts one week and then double it the next week, it cancels out.
Right. It doesn't work. And I think that's just even doing that really does help.
We were talking about protein a little bit earlier. You mentioned it. And I have to ask about the carnivore diet, because this is a diet that some people have tried, but I'm very curious to see if you have any thoughts or opinions on the carnivore diet, because basically you're only really allowed to consume meat, poultry, eggs, seafood, fish, some dairy products, and water is what it says.
Well, I guess there's really not a whole lot more to say about it, because we know that's what we're eating. I think it really does come down to, now you're going to have deficiencies again. So will it work for a while? Absolutely. I think what'll happen, once again, it kind of goes back to your mindset. But I do think that eventually you're going to get, kind of like I think a lot of people on the keto diet, you're going to get mentally burned out, and you will go back and you will eat more, and you're going to gain more weight than you had. So, but like I said, some people it works very well. I would be more along the lines of a hunter-gatherer type diet. Think about this. Can you hunt it? Can you gather it, eat it, and you're good to go? So, for example, just think about berries. You can gather berries. You can gather nuts. You can gather apples and whatnot. You can gather potatoes. You can hunt fish. You can hunt whatever. All the meat groups you can go hunting. Gather those eggs and so forth. And then kind of stay away from the processed stuff. If you're staying away or severely limiting the middle sections of the grocery store, so to speak, that makes a huge difference. A hunter-gatherer type diet is actually one that, is it sustainable? I think it is, but it's also, you still got to have a mindset that works for you. Finding that bread that's the least processed may not taste as good because we're not used to it. But I think if you were able to get yourself used to it, it's like, hey, I can have this bread. It's sprouted grains that you'll find those in the freezer section. Mm-hmm. Because if you leave them on the counter too long, they're going to mold in short order. Nowadays, you leave a loaf of bread on the counter for a darn month and it's not even molded. That's kind of spooky.
I go back to when I was in 8th grade in my science class with Mr. Spellerberg, because Abby had Mr. Spellerberg, my sister, and there was a garlic cheesy bread, flatbread type food from the lunchroom, and it hadn't molded, and it had been years. That's what we're putting into our bodies, is just highly processed things that just don't mold anymore.
I dabble a lot on this stuff, but if you flip over any of the processed foods that you buy in the store, and if you can't pronounce the name of what's in it, I would be a little bit more cautious about buying that.
When you talk about a hunter-gatherer diet, aka just try to focus on organic foods, I look to how much obesity has increased. Just since 2000, it has increased by like nearly 15% in all of America. And that's a lot when it comes to
millions of people. That's a ton.
That's 15, 20 million people, maybe even more, actually. It might be more like 50 million people. That's crazy. And I think that just kind of goes to show how food has kind of just changed over the years, really.
It's definitely a combination of two things. We want the easy button. We're not as active, and you're right. We're eating all of this processed food, and I actually think that's where the gluten stuff came from too. Is I think most people aren't gluten intolerant. I think it's the processing ways that our food has really been evolved over the number of years that have caused us gluten problems, which I think is really kind of interesting. I never heard of gluten issues 15, 20 years ago, and I really do think it has something to do with the highly processed foods that we're eating.
This is kind of a random idea I had in mind, because in one of my college classes, persuasion, there are 2 different mindsets that I'm learning about. And there's the central route, where people are much more thoughtful, information driven. They want to pay attention to like, more of the fine print details, like turning over, the packaging and reading what's in it. And there's also the peripheral route, which I feel like pretty much everybody falls into when it comes to food. They see something that looks good and they're going to pick it up off the shelf just because it looks good to them and it appeals to them.
Marketing.
Yeah, it's just, I think over time we've mastered marketing in a way that we know how to appeal to customers, and it's just basically what looks good, they're going to get it. So just a random thought.
Well, I think you're absolutely right on, because you look at that packaging or you're watching that TV and that Pizza Hut commercial comes on and they're pulling that pizza apart and like, oh yeah, I want pizza now.
Nobody's crazy if you know that something is going to cause a certain disease or increase your chances of getting cancer or something. You're not going to have it. Right. If you really think about it. When it comes to shopping, try harder at just simply thinking about what it's going to do to you.
So in other words, we just got to think a little bit.
We got to think a little bit harder.
Yeah,
just a little bit.
That's hard. You got to think. We're too impulsive.
Now, got a couple questions. Do a little true or false.
Ooh.
Clean eating automatically means fat loss.
False.
Whoa.
I think the big thing is clean eating. Obviously you want to eat clean. Let's take nuts and avocados and whatnot, for example. Very good, very healthy for you. But just one little handful of nuts is 150 calories. How many times do you eat just a little handful of nuts? Not very often. Mm-hmm. You're going to eat probably 5 handfuls of nuts. Next thing you know, you got 1,000 calories before you even know it, just from one thing. So some of the fat stuff that's healthy for us, and we know, like even an avocado, granted, we're probably not going and eating 3 avocados at a sitting.
Sometimes it's really good at some of those Mexican places.
Right. Obviously, it's what we want to do. We want to eat clean, but if you just go out, if you're trying to have fat loss, now 1 pound of fat theoretically is 3,500 calories. So if you want to drop 1 pound of fat, I'm not talking scale weight, I'm talking fat weight, you've got to expend 3,500 calories more than you take in. And that's with a combination of exercise and nutrition and diet. So if you were to expend 500 calories more than you take it in each day for a week, you theoretically should lose 1 pound of fat.
It's really a caloric deficit. It still matters.
It does still matter.
You can't just eat.
You can't just go and eat whatever you want.
You can out-train a bad diet.
False.
I expected this, but I'm just
curious. Coming from a guy that is an exercise guy. You know what I've learned? I've been in this now for coming up on, holy smokes, what year are we? So it'll be 30 years. You can maintain on a crappy diet. I've found that out. I've seen that multiple times. But I have not seen anybody out-train a bad diet. And I think that if you're taking in 5,000 calories and you go work out, more than likely you may expend 500, maybe 700. I don't know, depending on what that workout is you might be doing. Should you be able to drop a pound of fat a week? Theoretically, yes, but I think what happens is you end up eating more.
Yeah, you're more hungry after you burn off the calories.
And that doesn't take much if you have a bad diet. Just eating a little bit more, you've already lost that negative caloric expenditure.
Now the next one, I know the obvious answer. You have to cut out sugar.
False.
There are good sugars.
Yeah.
Like fruits. Those are more natural sugars. That's what you want. But also there's a good point of where, like, if you're trying to cut out sugar with like a diet soda, it's not like that soda's perfect.
No, exactly. Your body doesn't understand it, so your body thinks it's regular sugar anyway. Mm-hmm. So that's why you'll see people still gain weight using diet drinks too. It doesn't work that way. But yeah, do you have to minimize it? Absolutely. But you do not have to cut it fully out to lose weight.
Now those were some simple true or falses. Not surprising, all of them were false.
Wow, I thought you were going to be getting me some true ones in there somewhere.
Yep. Just a few more topics here before we wrap it up this week. Downsides, dangers of extreme dieting. So first of all, we're going to start with extreme calorie restriction.
There's an issue there. And now, I think the biggest thing is you're going to have a lot of fatigue eventually. You won't notice it for the first day or two, but then after that, your fatigue's going to set in. You're going to start to slowly lose lean body mass, and then which in turn leads to slowing down your metabolism. And then guess what? It's not a diet that's sustainable. So what you will end up doing is going crazy and eating more food and adding more fat weight. So this kind of brings me to, you probably don't even remember watching it, The Biggest Loser.
Oh, of course I do.
Okay, so I'm going way back, like to the first ones. I probably got to the point where I was like, this is kind of a BS show after a while, just because.
Have you seen their stuff coming out now about it?
I did. I literally just watched it probably within the last month, and they had them eating what, 800 to 1,000 calories a day. Exercising for hours on end on a day, and they lost 150 pounds or whatever. Well, I think the majority of them are heavier now than they were when they went in, and that's sad. It really is. That's just a sad deal, and it was all for publicity on TV, and I just kind of thought it was BS how the trainers were acting. And I mean, if I go out and I'm starting yelling and belittling people like that, I'm not gonna have a business very long.
Yeah, nobody's gonna want to come back.
Right. So I can give people crap and so forth in my own ways, but then those people know me and my personality. But that, it just bugged me. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, definitely gonna end up harming you in the end.
So when it comes to that show, was the reason they gained weight after the fact was because their metabolism got slowed to a point where they weren't able, obviously, to keep that 800 to 1,000 calorie deficit, so they started eating a little bit more, and then their just metabolism couldn't keep up, or like, how does that work?
Well, to be honest with you, I can't give you like a full big answer on it. I think that everything was just out of whack. These people, probably lost muscle mass. I mean, they're probably stronger, which most of it probably was your nervous system understanding the movements, so they got more efficient with those movements. But when you're one of those guys, let's say you're 500 pounds, there's a lot of muscle under there to carry 500 pounds around, especially lower body wise. And you drop 250 pounds, and then let's say you were carrying 150 pounds of skeletal muscle mass, and you're down to 130 pounds. That's 20 pounds of muscle that you just lost too. Mm-hmm. So your metabolism slows down, and next thing you know, you start eating more and more and more, and then it's just a nasty situation.
Now, yo-yo dieting. Basically, you're constantly losing and regaining weight, which messes with hormones and mental health.
Yeah, the yo-yo dieting is a challenge, because I think that, we run different challenges around here. I like to do fat weight loss challenges. I use anything from skin fold measurements to chart progress to the in-body scale, which actually works really well. And I think that the challenge with doing those is that people will make progress, and then they'll come back and do another challenge, and they're going to be up a little bit again. I wouldn't necessarily call those yo-yo dieters or yo-yo dieting, but it's definitely a thing. And I think it really goes back to your why. Why are you doing this in the first place? And figuring out what is your why, why are you doing this diet to lose fat weight, and then staying consistent with it. That's really, if you figure out, you know your why, and you stay consistent and committed to your plan, then yo-yo dieting isn't a thing.
It almost always goes right back to motivation, really.
Yep.
If you're motivated, you'll stay more consistent. If you're consistent, you'll get healthier, you'll lose weight, you'll feel better. So it really just goes back to motivation, I would say.
Yeah, and I think, motivation's going to wane.
Yeah.
You're not always motivated. That's where, like I said, you got to figure out yourself, why are you doing something? Why are you, like, for instance, I think about running a business, Max Performance Fitness. Why? My why. Do you think it's easy to get up every day at 4 a.m? No. I go through a lot of different challenges with running the business, and you go back to your why. Why are you doing this? You know what? My goal is to make a difference in somebody's life. And if I'm making a difference in somebody's life, that is the why, and the why I'm doing it. that'll keep me going. And so as long as I'm making a difference, I know that I can keep going. So you just got to figure your why, and you got to stick to it, plain and simple.
When it comes to obsession over numbers, what does that necessarily mean to you?
Well, I mean, I definitely think that's a thing. And I think it's a challenge to deal with in this business, where I've got some people that are really good about, they'll come in, they'll do their in-body scans, you'll give them their plan, they'll go through it, and then they will come back and rescan, so forth, and they're fine. I've got other people that'll do the initial measurement, and then they're almost scared to do it again because they are afraid that they didn't make progress. So they've got that obsession with, crap, I don't know if I did enough this week. I'm just not going to do it. So the other thing, if we talk about the obsession with numbers, would be counting your macros, counting calories. You know, I do have some people that, all right, they want to know exactly how much they're putting into the body and so forth, which is great, but that doesn't work for everybody either. So once again, it really does go back to mentally what works for you. And then if we look at body composition numbers, it's really not necessarily always a number. I mean, yeah, we want to be in a certain zone as far as for health reasons, but do you feel good? Are you confident? Do you feel good in what you're wearing? Do you hold your head up high when you're walking down the street and not stare down at the ground? I mean, that makes a big difference right there. You know where you're at. Do your clothes fit better? Perfect. You're making progress. You know that. So I mean, mentally, do you feel better? Absolutely. Perfect. I mean, that's where the number doesn't matter.
Now we have reached the ending of MPF Podcast, Episode 2. And if you've made it this far, we have a special opportunity for you. The first person to comment on this video will get a free in-body scan. You can comment whatever you want, maybe a question. We can shout you out the next podcast. So feel free to comment below if you want a free in-body scan. And do you have anything else to add?
Man, that was a lot of stuff today. Once again, this was really just for informational purposes. Hopefully you learned a couple things. Do you have to follow an exact diet? Absolutely not. It's just, but once you figure out, what's realistic for you, you've got to be consistent. And you got to figure out why you want to do it. Be consistent. Don't ever quit. Keep going.
Subscribe to the MPF Podcast, of course. Here to give you good fitness advice every Sunday. Make sure you like this video if you enjoyed, and put a comment below of any questions you have. We'll see you guys next week.